"Round a word a man like you," said the Apache girl. Rancher took her in. Tala had never been afraid of the desert before. Her people, the Apache, had lived under its harsh sun for generations. The desert was her home, and its hot winds had always whispered comfort in her ears. But today, everything was different. Tala's world had turned upside down. The attack on her village had been swift and brutal. Her family, the people who had taught her how to live off the land, were gone. The memories of that day were still too fresh, too painful. She remembered the shouting, the chaos, and the helpless feeling of being torn away from everything she had known. Tala ran, leaving behind the smoke and destruction. She couldn't stop. Her feet were blistered, her throat dry, but she kept going. The burning sun beat down on her, and she stumbled across the dry, cracked earth, too weak to feel the pain anymore. Her only goal was to get away, to escape the fear and the grief. As the day dragged on, the landscape around her seemed to blur. She could barely tell where she was anymore. She had wandered too far, and the desert had swallowed her whole. Her stomach growled in hunger, and her lips cracked from thirst. She felt dizzy and weak, but there was no place to rest. Not anymore. That's when she saw him. At first it was just a figure in the distance, a shadow against the harsh sun. But as he drew closer, Tala realized it was a man riding a horse. He looked different from the settlers who had attacked her village. This man wasn't wearing the heavy clothes of the soldiers she'd seen, nor did he carry a weapon in his hand. He looked like a traveler, someone who belonged to the land rather than trying to own it. Tala stopped in her tracks, unsure of what to do. Her instincts screamed at her to hide, to run, to stay away from anyone. But there was nowhere left to go. Her body was too tired, her mind too scattered. She knew she couldn't keep going like this. The man's horse slowed as he approached. His gaze locked onto her. Tala took a step back, trying to shield herself from his view, but she was too weak to keep her balance. Her legs wobbled, and before she knew it, she was on the ground, falling to her knees. The man dismounted quickly, his movements calm and deliberate. Tala felt the heat of his gaze on her, but she couldn't look up. She felt ashamed, exposed, as though he could see everything, her fear, her pain, her exhaustion. "Are you all right?" the man asked, his voice low and steady. Tala shook her head, unable to speak. She had been taught never to show weakness, never to rely on others. But now all that pride seemed so far away. She was a stranger in her own land, lost and alone. The man stepped closer and knelt beside her. "I have water," he said, his voice gentle. He pulled out a canteen and offered it to her. Tala hesitated, but she had always been cautious, never trusting anyone outside her tribe. But something about this man felt different. His presence wasn't threatening. He wasn't there to hurt her, so, with a trembling hand, she accepted the water. It was cool, a small comfort in the unbearable heat. She drank deeply, allowing herself to feel the relief as the water slid down her parched throat. When she finished, the man took back the canteen and stood up. "You're far from home," he said. "Where are you headed?" Tala couldn't bring herself to answer. She didn't have a home anymore. The only place she had known was gone. And she didn't know where to go next. All she had now was the endless desert and the memory of her family's voices echoing faintly in her mind. The man seemed to understand her silence. He didn't push her for answers. Instead, he watched her for a moment, as if weighing something in his mind. Then he made a decision. "Come with me," he said. "I have a ranch not far from here. You can rest there. Get some food. Chat. It's safer than out here." Tala looked up at him, startled by his offer. She was used to people taking from her, but never had anyone offered her something freely. She didn't trust easily, but the desperation in her heart made her consider his words. She knew she couldn't stay in the desert much longer. She was too tired to fight for survival any longer. And so, with a hesitant nod, she agreed. The man helped her onto his horse, and they began the journey to his ranch. As they rode, Tala kept her eyes on the ground, unsure of what to expect. She had heard stories of the settlers, how they saw her people as nothing more than savages. What if he was like them? What if he was just pretending to be kind, only to hurt her later? But every time she glanced up, she saw nothing but kindness in his eyes. There was no malice in the way he spoke to her, no condescension in his voice. For the first time since the attack, Tala felt a tiny spark of hope. The journey felt long, but eventually the land began to change. The dry, cracked earth gave way to fields of green, and the air seemed fresher, less suffocating. As they approached the ranch, Tala saw that it was a small but well-kept place. There were horses grazing in the fields and a barn in the distance. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos she had left behind. The man dismounted and helped Tala down, guiding her toward the small house. She couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and uncertainty. Could she really trust him? Could she find a new life here? As they reached the door, the man turned to her. "My name's James," he said. "What's yours?" Tala hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to answer. Her name felt foreign on her tongue now, a reminder of the life she had lost, but she whispered it anyway, barely audible. "Tala." James gave her a soft smile, one that didn't feel forced. "Pa," he repeated. "It's nice to meet you." Inside the house, he showed her to a small room where she could rest. The bed was simple but clean, and there was a basin of water waiting for her. Tala felt a rush of gratitude but didn't know how to express it. She had been so used to surviving on her own that receiving help felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. James left her alone to rest, and Tala sat on the bed staring at the walls. She was overwhelmed by the kindness she had received, unsure of what it meant or how to repay it. But for the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe again. Maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could be safe. The next morning, Tala awoke to the sound of birds singing outside the small window of the room where she had spent the night. At first, she wasn't sure where she was. It all felt like a dream that was too good to be true. The soft bed beneath her, the clean water, the safety of the walls around her, it all felt so different from the harshness of the desert she had come from. She sat up slowly, still unsure of what to do. She had never been in a place like this before. It was peaceful. There was no danger, no need to constantly be on guard. She could hear the soft rustle of the wind outside, the faint sound of horses whinnying in the distance. Everything seemed calm, almost unreal. Narration. Tala ran a hand through her tangled hair, feeling the weight of the last few days. She had barely eaten, barely slept, but now she was here, in a place where people were kind, where they didn't look at her like she was something to be feared. But she couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't last, that this, too, was something temporary. Rand. She stood up and walked to the window, gazing out over the ranch. It was small, but it was beautiful. Resound in dispatch. There were fields stretching as far as the eye could see, with green grass swaying in the morning breeze. Horses grazed nearby, their coats shining in the sunlight. The barn stood in the distance, and the house she had been brought to was simple but sturdy. Tala couldn't help but feel a small pang of hope. Maybe this could be the start of something new. Paused. Maybe she could find peace here, away from the life she had known. But doubt still lingered in her heart. How long would she be welcome? Would she be able to fit in with these people who were so different from her own? As she stood there, lost in thought, there was a knock at the door. Tala turned quickly, startled by the sound.
He glances around in despair. The door opened and James stepped inside.
Breath. He was holding a tray with food, bread, cheese, fruit, and a steaming cup of tea. Tala's stomach growled loudly at the sight, but she didn't know how to feel about the food. She was used to eating only what she could find or hunt for herself, never having someone offer her such kindness. "I thought you might be hungry," James said with a gentle smile. "I brought you some breakfast." Tala looked at the food, her mouth watering, but she hesitated. She didn't want to seem weak, but her body ached with hunger. Finally, she nodded and stepped forward, taking the tray from his hands. The bread was soft, the cheese creamy, and the fruit was sweet. It was the first real meal she had had in days, and she savored every bite. James watched her quietly, as though he understood how difficult it was for her to accept such kindness. He sat down at the edge of the room, not pushing her to talk or explain anything. He just let her eat in peace. When she finished, she looked up at him, feeling a sense of gratitude but also uncertainty.
"Thank you," she said softly, unsure of how to express the flood of emotions she felt. "You're welcome," he replied, his voice calm. "You're safe here."
"You can rest as long as you need to." Tala nodded but didn't speak. There was so much she wanted to say, but she didn't know where to begin. She was afraid that the moment she opened up, everything would crumble, and she would be left alone again. It was easier to stay quiet, to keep the walls around her heart intact. James seemed to sense her unease. He stood up, offering a small smile. "I'm going to check on the horses. If you want, you can come with me. I could use the help, and it might be a good way to get to know the ranch better." Bye. Tala looked at him, unsure. She wasn't used to asking for help, but she knew she had to learn. And being around the horses might be a good distraction, something to keep her mind occupied. After all, she had always felt a connection to animals, especially horses, the way they moved, the way they communicated without words. It reminded her of the bond she had once shared with her people. "I'll come," she said after a moment, her voice steady. Together they walked outside, and Tala took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh air. It was different from the dry, choking air of the desert.
The air felt clean.
He showed her the different animals, explaining their names and how to care for them. Tala listened intently, her eyes following every movement. The horses were strong and graceful, their coats shiny and healthy. James introduced her to a beautiful chestnut mare named Rosie, who had a gentle nature but was known for being a little stubborn. "Would you like to try working with her?" James asked, handing Tala a brush. "She's good for beginners." "Just be gentle with her and she'll respond." Tala hesitated but took the brush from his hand. Pressed. She had never worked with horses in this way before, but she was eager to learn. She walked toward Rosie, who turned her head to look at her, ears flicking curiously. "Easy there," James said, his voice soft but firm. Let her get used to your presence first. Horses can sense how you feel. If you're calm, she'll be calm. Paula nodded and took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous energy that was bubbling inside her. She reached out slowly, brushing her fingers over the mare's soft coat. Rosie nickered, and Tala smiled, feeling a sense of connection. She had always felt a bond with animals, but this was different. It was as if the horse was acknowledging her, offering her the same kindness James had shown her. As she worked with Rosie, Tala began to feel a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The rhythmic motion of brushing the horse, the quiet sounds of the barn, and the presence of James beside her. It all started to wash away some of the fear and uncertainty that had been weighing on her. For the first time in days, she felt like she wasn't alone. James watched her for a while, his expression thoughtful. "You've got a good touch with her," he said. "I can tell you've worked with animals before." Tala nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "My people, we've always had horses." Breath. "They're part of us." James gave her a small, understanding smile. "I can tell."
You have a way with them. The rest of the morning passed quietly, with Tala working alongside James and learning more about the ranch.
She helped feed the horses, clean the stalls, and learn about the work that needed to be done. It was hard work, but it felt good to be productive again. By the time the sun began to dip low in the sky, Tala was exhausted but content. She had never imagined that something so simple, feeding and caring for animals, could bring her a sense of purpose. As they walked back to the house, James spoke again, his voice serious. "You don't have to stay here if you don't want to. You're free to go whenever you choose. But if you stay, you'll have a place with me. You'll never have to go through what you've been through again." Tala stopped for a moment, looking at him. His words were heavy, and she could hear the sincerity in his voice. It was a promise of safety, of a life without fear. "I don't know what I want," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm afraid to trust again." James nodded, as though he understood. Breaths. "You don't have to decide anything today. You take your time." "No one's rushing you." Tala nodded, feeling the weight of his words. Maybe, just maybe, she could learn to trust again. Maybe this could be the start of something new, a chance to heal from the past and build something better. Days passed, and Tala slowly began to adapt to life at the ranch. The work was hard, but it was good. It was the kind of work that kept her busy and her mind clear. Every morning she would wake early to tend to the horses. James had shown her how to properly care for the animals, and she quickly became skilled at brushing them, feeding them, and making sure they were comfortable. Rosie, the chestnut mare, became her favorite. The horse seemed to have a special bond with her, always responding to her touch with calmness. But despite the comfort that came with the routine, Tala could still feel the weight of her past pressing against her. The memories of the attack on her village, the faces of her family as they were taken from her, haunted her in moments when she wasn't busy. But sometimes when she was alone in the barn, she would close her eyes and see the images again, the screams, the smoke, and the feeling of helplessness. It was as though the desert was always in the back of her mind, a part of her that she couldn't fully escape. The other ranch workers were kind enough, but Tala felt the distance between them. She was different from them. Her skin was darker, her hair darker, and her eyes, though they didn't look so different to her, seemed to carry a sadness that the others didn't understand. They didn't say anything outright, but she could see it in their eyes when they looked at her, a kind of cautious curiosity mixed with uncertainty. Some of them would talk to her in passing, but none of them made any real effort to befriend her. It made her feel like an outsider in a place that was supposed to offer her safety. James was the only one who treated her differently. He never made her feel like she was out of place. He always included her in the daily tasks, made sure she had what she needed, and encouraged her when she started to feel frustrated. But he would even laugh with her, something she hadn't done in what felt like forever. But even his kindness wasn't enough to completely erase the feeling of being alone. Bruspas. Tala missed her people. She missed the familiar sounds of the campfires at night, the songs, the stories passed down from generation to generation. Desperate tree. She longed for the land she had known, for the wild freedom that came with being part of a community.
Here, at the ranch, everything was so different.
She had to follow rules, follow routines, and adapt to a life that didn't quite fit her. One evening, as the sun began to set, James asked Tala to walk with him down by the creek. It had been a long day of work, and they were both tired, but the peaceful sound of running water seemed to call to them. They walked in silence for a while, the soft rustling of the trees around them, the only sound. Finally, James spoke, his voice gentle but serious. "You've been quiet lately. Is everything all right?" Tala looked at him, surprised by the question. She hadn't realized how much she had been withdrawing into herself. She had tried so hard to keep up with the work and keep herself busy, but the loneliness had crept in. She didn't know how to explain it to him, to put into words the way she was feeling. "I'm just not used to this," she said finally. "It's hard to fit in. I'm not like the others here." Brasp. James nodded, his expression understanding. "I know. It's not easy to adjust to a new life, especially when the old one is still with you." Tala was silent for a moment. The words James spoke resonated deeply with her. She had spent so much time trying to outrun her past that she hadn't given herself the time to process it. She had tried to bury the pain, to hide from it by focusing on work. But it always came back when she least expected it. "Sometimes I feel like I don't belong anywhere," she admitted, her voice low. James stopped walking and turned to face her. He looked at her for a long moment, as if trying to see inside her soul. Then, without saying a word, he placed a hand on her shoulder. Breath. The simple gesture was enough to make her feel seen, to remind her that she wasn't alone. "You belong here," he said softly.
You belong with me. No one is asking you to change who you are.
"You don't have to fit in with anyone but yourself." Tala looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of emotions. She had heard those words before, from her family, from her people, but hearing them now in this new life was different. She had always believed in the strength of her heritage, in the power of her people, but now that strength felt distant. The world had changed, and she wasn't sure where she stood anymore. James must have seen the conflict in her eyes, because he spoke again, his voice gentle. "It's all right to be lost sometimes."
You don't have to have all the answers right away. We can figure this out together.
Tala nodded slowly, though she wasn't sure how to explain the emotions swirling inside her. There was so much she wanted to say, so much she wanted to share with him, but part of her still held back, afraid that if she let too much out, she would break. She had spent so long guarding her heart, not allowing anyone too close, that the thought of letting someone in seemed both terrifying and freeing.
I'll try, she said finally. But it's hard.
Raish, I don't know how to trust again. James gave her a small smile, his eyes full of kindness. Trust is a long road, Tala, but you don't have to walk it alone. They stood there by the creek, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the land. The world around them seemed so still, so peaceful. For a brief moment, Tala allowed herself to feel the comfort of the moment. She was safe. She wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, this place, this ranch, could become a home for her. The next few days passed quietly, and Tala found herself slowly settling into a routine. She continued to work with the horses, learning more each day. She had a natural talent for it, something she had never realized before. Her bond with Rosie deepened, and there were moments when she felt a kind of joy that she hadn't felt in so long. It was strange, this feeling of being content. She wasn't used to it, but she began to crave it.
James continued to support her, never pushing her to open up more than she was ready to.
He gave her space when she needed it, but he also made sure to check in with her every day, asking how she was feeling, how the work was going.
He made sure she knew she was valued, that she mattered. It was something she had never experienced before, and it was hard for her to believe at times. But as the days turned into weeks, Tala began to realize that James wasn't just offering her a place to stay. He was offering her something more, something she had long forgotten, a sense of belonging. She still struggled with her past, with the memories that haunted her every night. But for the first time, she had a small sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to build a future here.
It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight.
But the journey had begun, and for the first time in a long time, Tala was willing to take it. The days on the ranch seemed to pass by in a steady rhythm, each one blending into the next, but Tala didn't mind. There was a comfort in routine, in knowing what to expect. Every morning she would wake up before the sun and tend to the horses, her hands moving automatically through the tasks she had come to know so well. Feeding the animals, grooming their coats, cleaning the stalls. It was hard work, but it felt right. And it gave her something to focus on, something to keep her mind from wandering back to the life she had left behind. But there were moments when her thoughts would slip away from the ranch, carried back to memories of her family and the life she had known before. The quiet evenings by the campfire, the sound of her people's voices singing, the way they had always moved together as a community. It was all so far away now, like a dream she couldn't quite reach. And though she had come to care for James and the ranch, there was still a part of her that felt lost. James, however, seemed to understand, but never forced her to open up, never forced her to talk about the past if she wasn't ready. But he was always there, steady and constant, a quiet presence that gave her comfort even when she couldn't express it. His kindness had become a lifeline for her, a small thread that kept her tethered to this new life she was trying to build. It wasn't long before Tala realized that she had come to rely on James more than she had anticipated. There was something about him, something that made her feel safe, something that made her heart beat a little faster when he was near. She hadn't allowed herself to feel this way in a long time. It was easier to build walls, to protect herself from getting hurt again. But with James, the walls were slowly starting to crumble, and it both terrified and excited her. One evening, after a long day of work, James invited her to join him for dinner. It was a simple meal, roast chicken, bread, and vegetables, but it was enough to fill the hunger that had become a constant companion for Tala, breath. She sat at the small table in the kitchen, the warm glow of the lantern casting soft shadows on the walls. As they ate, there was a comfortable silence between them, the kind that comes from shared understanding, breaths. Tala found herself glancing at James more often than she had before, noticing the way the firelight danced across his face, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. There was something gentle about him, something kind that made her feel like she could trust him with more than just the surface of who she was. Finally, after they had finished eating, James leaned back in his chair and looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "You've been doing well here," he said, his voice steady. "I can see that you've been working hard and it's paying off." "You've come a long way." Tala nodded, feeling a small flush of pride. I've had to. I didn't have a choice. James looked at her more closely, as though weighing his words carefully. I know it hasn't been easy.
I can't imagine what you've been through. But you've made it here, and that's something to be proud of.
Psst. You've survived. And now, you have the chance to build something new. Tala was silent for a moment, her fingers tracing the edge of her plate. I never thought I'd end up here. I didn't think there was a place for me anymore. After everything that happened, I didn't think I'd have a future. James' eyes softened as he leaned forward, his voice quiet but earnest. You do have a future, Tala.
It might not look like what you thought it would, but you have one, and I want to help you build it.
His words hit her harder than she expected. She hadn't realized just how much she needed to hear them until he said them. For so long she had felt like she was drifting, like she was just surviving day to day, with no real sense of where she was going. But James was offering her something different, a chance to truly live, to build a future that was hers. Tala swallowed, her throat tight. I don't know how to do that.
I don't know how to move on from the past. James gave her a small, understanding smile. You don't have to have all the answers right now.
No one does. But you can start by taking one step at a time.
And I'll be here to help you with every step. Tala felt a lump form in her throat, a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite understand.
She had always been strong, had always taken care of herself. But here, with James, she didn't have to be strong all the time. She didn't have to hide the pain.
She didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone anymore. Without thinking, she reached across the table and took his hand.
James looked at her in surprise, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he gave her hand a gentle squeeze, and for a moment, it felt like everything else faded away. The past, the pain, the loneliness, they were all distant memories, replaced by the warmth of his touch and the quiet promise that, for once, she wasn't alone.
I don't know what the future holds, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper.
But I know I want to be here. With you. James' gaze softened, and he gave her a small, reassuring smile. And you'll always have a place here. You belong here, Tala.
You don't have to figure everything out right away. Just take it one day at a time.
For the first time since she had arrived at the ranch, Tala allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future grasp. She could see it now, not just as a dream, but as something tangible. The ranch, the horses, James, they could be part of her new life, a life she never thought she would have. In the days that followed, Tala continued to work alongside James, but their relationship began to shift. There was a new understanding between them, an unspoken bond that deepened with every passing day. They laughed together more, shared stories, and spent time simply being in each other's company.
James never pushed her to open up more than she was ready to, but she found herself slowly starting to trust him with pieces of her past little by little.
One evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, James turned to her, his voice quiet but steady. Tala, I've been thinking a lot about the future, and I want you to know that I care about you. I want to be there for you, not just as a friend, but as something more. Tala's heart skipped a beat, and she turned to look at him, her breath catching in her throat. Breaths. She had known for a while that there was something between them, something more than just the bond of survival. But hearing him say it aloud made everything feel real, like it was no longer a dream. I care about you too, she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. More than I thought I could. For a long moment they just looked at each other, the weight of their feelings hanging between them. And in that silence, Tala realized that she had finally found something she had been searching for. A place to belong, a person who cared for her, and a future that was worth fighting for.
The days on the ranch had changed Tala in ways she hadn't expected.
She had gone from feeling lost and alone to finding a place where she felt needed, wanted, and even cared for. It had taken time, but she had learned that healing wasn't something that happened overnight. It came with each small step, with every day spent in the company of people who were patient and kind. It came with the knowledge that she wasn't alone anymore. James had been the one constant in all of this. He had given her the time and space to find herself again, to remember what it felt like to hope. He never pushed her, never made her feel like she had to hurry to get over her past. Instead, he was always there, with a steady hand and a gentle heart, ready to help her whenever she needed it. One morning, as the sun began to rise over the ranch, Tala stood outside, gazing at the sky. The world seemed so quiet, so peaceful. The air was cool, and the fields stretched out before her, bathed in the soft light of dawn. It was the kind of beauty she hadn't seen in a long time, because for so long she had been consumed by pain and fear. But now, there was a stillness in her heart. For the first time since the attack on her village, Tala felt calm. She had been working hard every day, learning more about the ranch, the animals, and the life James had built for himself. But there was something more, something she had been too afraid to admit. Over time, her feelings for James had grown stronger. She had tried to ignore it, tried to bury the emotions that stirred whenever he was near. But now, standing in the quiet morning, she knew that what she felt wasn't just gratitude for his kindness. It was more, much more. As she stood there, lost in her thoughts, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find James walking toward her, his expression soft but serious. There was something about the way he looked at her, something that made her heart race.
"You look like you're deep in thought," he said with a small smile.
Tala chuckled softly, her fingers tracing the edge of her shirt.
I was just thinking about how much has changed since I came here.
How much has changed in me? James nodded, his gaze thoughtful. Change is never easy.
But you've done more than survive, Tala.
You've started to live again. Tala smiled at him, feeling the warmth of his words. It was true. She had spent so much time just trying to survive, just trying to make it through each day. But now, she was beginning to feel like she could truly live. She had a future again, one that was filled with possibilities. James stepped closer, his presence comforting, yet it made her heart beat a little faster.
"You've become part of this place," he continued, his voice steady.
And part of my life. And I want you to know that I don't want that to change.
I want you here, with me. Tala's breath caught in her throat, and she turned away slightly, not knowing what to say. She had known for a while that she felt something more than just friendship for James, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel so real. She felt a rush of emotions, fear, hope, uncertainty, and something else she couldn't quite name. She turned back to him, her voice trembling slightly. Breath. James, I don't know how to say this, but I feel the same. I care about you more than I ever thought I could care about someone.
James took a step forward, his hand reaching out to gently touch hers. You don't have to say anything. I know.
I've known for a long time. He smiled softly, the kind of smile that made her heart flutter. You've been through so much. But I want you to know that whatever happens, I'll be here. I'll be with you. You don't have to face the world alone anymore." For a moment, Tala stood there, looking into his eyes. She could feel the weight of his words, the promise behind them. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. She had been afraid to let herself trust, afraid that the pain of the past would always follow her. But now, with James, she didn't feel afraid. She felt safe. Breaths. Safe enough to let go of the past, to move forward into something new.
"I'm not the same person I was when I first came here," she said softly. "I've changed."
And I think I'm ready to start something new. With you. James smiled again, this time with a warmth that filled her chest. "Then let's build that new beginning, Tala, together." Breaths. As the days turned into weeks, Tala and James began to build a life together. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when the past seemed too heavy to forget. But they faced those moments together, learning from each other, supporting one another. The connection between them grew stronger with every passing day. And with each step they took, Tala began to feel more at peace with the life she had found. She spent more time with the horses, learning new skills, and even began helping James with the ranch work. She had always been strong, but now she felt stronger than ever. Breath. The pain of her past was still there, but it didn't define her anymore. She had a new family now, and a new future. One evening, as they sat on the porch together after a long day, Tala leaned against the railing, looking out over the land. James sat beside her, his arm resting casually around her shoulders. The night was warm, the stars twinkling brightly overhead. "You know," James said quietly, "I never thought I'd have someone like you here with me. I've been alone for so long, but now it feels like this place is finally whole." Tala turned to look at him, her eyes soft. "I never thought I'd find a place where I could truly belong again," she said. "But here, with you, I do. I feel like I'm home." James smiled at her, his eyes filled with affection. "You are home."
"And you'll always have a place here." The words were simple, but they meant everything.
Tala felt a wave of warmth wash over her. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And, for the first time, she felt like she was truly free. Free to love, free to trust, and free to build the future she had once thought was lost to her. As the days went by, they continued to grow closer, their bond becoming something unbreakable. Together, they worked hard on the ranch, building a life that was filled with love, laughter, and hope. The past would always be a part of Tala, but with James by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. And as they looked toward the future, Tala realized that this new beginning, this life she was building with James, was everything she had ever dreamed of, even if she hadn't known it at the time. Together, they had created a future filled with promise, and it was a future that Tala was finally ready to embrace.